Hey everybody, it's Mandy from Chapel Forge. So today I'm going to do more of like a vlog style instead of like a teaching video. So everybody that knows us, follows us, watches us, whatever, knows that we are super passionate about food preservation. I mean, obviously. So today I want to talk about ways that you can preserve food that you don't need really any skills or really any special equipment. I know a lot of times preserving food can feel kind of restrictive if you're not already like immersed in this world, or you don't have tools or equipment or things like that. And, it can be accessible for a lot of people if you just kind of get creative. Having a freeze dryer is great, but it's $3,000, and not everybody has $3,000 to spend on a freeze dryer. Having a dehydrator is a much more affordable option than a freeze dryer. I mean, you can get a decent dehydrator for $150. The one that I have, I'll link in the description. It's the Kosori dehydrator. I'll link put my affiliate link in the description also for the freeze dryer, if that's something that you want to check out. But it is expensive. It's expensive and worth it. Like, its value is way beyond what it costs. And then there's other things like a water bath canner is really not expensive. You can literally just use a pot, but you need to get a jar lifter, and you need to have jars and new lids, and it can just get, you can do water bath canning very inexpensively, but there are a lot of things that, and I want to do a video on this in the future, is like my canning tools arsenal, because over the years, like, I've built up, like, I have food grade buckets and big bowls and extra jar lifters and, the little measurers, which you don't have to have that. I know some people just use like a plastic knife, and that's totally fine. But there's just a lot of things that do make food preservation a lot easier when you're canning. A food mill, things like that. A roaster. But these things get expensive. When you get into water bath canning, if you get the little toolkit, and like a canner, you can get started, but it's definitely not as easy if you don't have all the extra things. Pressure canner, I mean, I started with a cheap pressure canner. It was like $100. I hated it, and I passed it along to someone else. And my dad had actually gotten a really nice pressure canner from All American, and I love that one, but it's like $500. Thankfully, my dad bought one, and they weren't, really actively using it, so it kind of lives at my house, and I use it all the time. But it's expensive, and they're not available the last time I looked. At least not the one I have. I have the tall one that has that holds 14 quarts. So anyway, all of that to say, there are a lot of ways to preserve food that you don't need to have special equipment. So the first way to preserve food is bacon grease. And you're probably like, bacon grease, really? But why not save your bacon grease? You don't have to do anything at all to save your bacon grease. If you're cooking bacon, it's making grease. If you're cooking like real bacon, it's making grease. And so when we cook bacon, we cook it in the oven. We used to put it on foil, but we don't really cook with foil anymore because, the more you know, we don't really cook, the foil, it like leaches things, and it's just not good. So we don't cook with foil really ever. We keep foil in the house, but we don't really ever use it to cook. So we just put our bacon right on our baking sheet, and then when it comes out, obviously we pull our bacon off, we like drain it or whatever, and then we let it cool just a little bit, and then we like just scrape it off with a nice spatula, and we put it in a mason jar, and it sits on the counter. It doesn't need fridge. You can put it in a coffee mug. You can put it in whatever drinking glasses that you use. It literally doesn't need any special vessel. You don't even have to put a lid on it. We typically don't put a lid on it. We probably should, especially in the summer, because flies and things like that. But you don't have to put a lid on it. You can totally lid it though. When you start your jar, like if say, like we do bacon like maybe once a week, because bacon is, even though we're buying a hog from a farmer, you don't get a ton, and so we kind of try to stretch it. So, you'll put your grease in and say you get like an inch. Well, then like next week when you cook bacon again, you just pour it right on top, and there's your next. And I've never had it go bad. We probably just use it fast enough that it doesn't go bad. I guess if it just sat there, it could go rancid. But we don't cook really in olive oil or canola oil or vegetable oil or any of that other junk. We pretty much cook with lard, tallow, bacon grease, or butter. And I know that probably sounds super counterintuitive because you're like, your husband had a heart attack. Why are you cooking in bacon grease? Because bacon grease is from like a real animal, and God knew what he was doing when he created all these things. So, and he didn't have a heart attack because he ate too much bacon. That's an entirely different video. But these are the things that we cook in, and they're like pure real foods. So save your bacon grease, put it in a jar, leave it on the counter, cook with it. Put some in a pan, throw your vegetables in it. Whatever it is that you're trying to cook, you need a little bit of fat. It's perfect. Next thing you can do is, if you're growing some herbs, whether you grow your herbs in a windowsill, you grow them in maybe a little mini greenhouse outside. If you have a garden, you have just a little bed. Like right here, I have chives growing, and what did that chive seed cost me? Like half a penny. And I have chives, literally I have chives from like February to December. There's like a month or two in the winter, we're here in Pennsylvania, where it just gets a little bit too cold for the chives. And so I don't have them then. But they start popping back up in February. And, I have 3 pots like this around the deck, and we can cut chives off all the time. So what I do is, I either freeze dry them or dehydrate them. If I don't want to do either of those things, I want to do something different. You can freeze your herbs in cubes of whatever fat. So you could do like butter and put the herbs in that. You could do your bacon grease and put the herbs in that. You could just freeze the herbs in water. Like especially if you're just going to throw some in like a soup, you could freeze them in broth. If you're making your own broth, or you're doing store-bought broth, whatever. If you're not making your own broth, check out my video on that. It's super easy, and you literally can make delicious, nourishing bone broth for nothing. Save your bones, make your own broth. So that's a great way to preserve herbs. And literally, maybe an ice cube tray. I don't know if that's really considered special equipment, but if you don't have an ice cube tray, just find a small container, or you could use muffin tins. You could use the little silicone muffin cups. Any of those ways you could preserve your herbs and use them in many applications. So, like if you put it in butter, you put your little butter, your ice cube of butter and herbs in your skillet, do up some vegetables, done. And you've had those herbs. So, chives grow most of the year, at least here, but things like parsley, basil, tarragon, marjoram, whatever it is, whatever other things that if you have a growing season like us, where our growing season is like April to October, you can preserve those herbs in that season and then have them all year long, and it really doesn't cost you anything. Okay, so next way to preserve food with really no equipment is to render fat. So you could use the fat that you have left from pork or a steak or any meat that produces fat, anything that was like on a bone, or you have a roast and you trim the fat off. And I realize a lot of times you don't really get enough that's worth rendering it right on the spot, but we keep a bag in our freezer of fat, and we keep a bag in our freezer of bones. So we usually keep like pork fat that we render down into lard, and then like beef or bison that we'll render down to tallow. Lamb, we've gotten lamb from local farmers on occasion. We don't keep that all the time. But you can put all that stuff in a freezer bag, in a freezer Ziploc, put it in your freezer, and when your bag is full, your gallon Ziploc or whatever is full, just put it in a pot and render it down slowly. You literally put it in the pot, put the pot on low, give it a stir, keep an eye on it. You really don't want it to get super crackly or super excited. You just want it to be like low and slow. You could also do it in a crock pot, which I think is genius. Like you can just throw it in the crock pot, turn the crock pot on low, and it'll literally just sit there and make the fat for you. And again, then this is shelf stable. You can pour it in a mason jar, sit it on your counter, put it in your pantry, and you have fat. Typically, fats like this last like a year. If it gets really warm in your kitchen, it could be a little bit less. A lot of times, like I said, we run through this stuff faster than it goes bad, so it's not really a problem. That's another great way. You literally need a stove and something to sit it in, which I feel like if you have a kitchen, most people already have that. Okay, next way, and this seems like super elementary, but you can freeze things like bananas, peaches, berries, obviously meats. applesauce, tomato sauce. So let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, if you really want to dig into freezing, if you check out our podcast, I do a podcast with Missy at Homesteading Roots, and it's called The Wayward Homesteaders. You can find it on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, and we have a whole podcast on just freezing. And like I said, I know that sounds super basic, but there are some things that you should know before you go into freezing, like things that should be blanched because it stops the enzymes and things like that. So just some super basic things. You know, if you're buying meat in bulk, like if you're getting it from a butcher and you get a huge bag, like the last time we got a pig, we got a bunch of ground pork and we split it all up ourselves. You can freeze that, obviously. That requires nothing except a freezer and Ziplocs or a vacuum sealer. But, you know, again, we're not talking about special equipment in this, so let's go with Ziplocs. Bananas. So around here in Lancaster County, you can get boxes of bananas pretty easily. And so I freeze bananas like in groups of 4 because that's perfect for smoothies for our family, banana bread, muffins, you know, whatever. So you can freeze bananas. Peaches, when peaches are in season, that's one of those things that, like, if you are not into canning, you don't have the equipment to can, get your peaches, you can peel them, cut them up, throw them in freezer bags, and they'll be perfect. They're amazing on oatmeal, in yogurt, in smoothies, on ice cream, endless uses for peaches. And you really don't have to do anything to them. You could put some sugar in. I personally feel like they're sweet enough. Why add the extra sugar? You can make a syrup if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. Berries are super easy. Berries and grapes are so easy to freeze. Like, they're no work. I love getting blueberries in June. That's when they're in season here, and you literally just throw them in a bag. Like, there could not be an easier way to preserve food. Grapes, if they're on sale at the store, you know, whatever. If you can access like a bulk amount of grapes, or if in whatever season you get Concord grapes. So like here, it's usually September, October-ish. You could theoretically freeze those, and then when you pull them out of the freezer, you can juice them down. Now, again, you're probably like, well, I don't have a juicer, or I don't this, or I don't that. You can just put them in a pot, and then you could cook them down, get all that good juice, run them through a strainer, you have grape juice. So you don't have to can, you know, we can grape juice and put it on the shelf, but you don't have to do that. You can literally just freeze the grapes and just make it when you need it. It's not really a big process. And it's a great way to get a healthy juice, like, you know, amazing antioxidants, like all this kind of stuff. And it doesn't have all that extra sugar and garbage that the grape juice probably has that you buy from the grocery store. Applesauce, tomato sauce. Again, this one is a little bit more work, but if you don't want to go into canning or whatever, you know, you can bring the tomatoes in from your garden and you can throw them in the freezer. And if you want to whip up some tomato sauce, you literally just throw them in a pot, get your immersion blender out, or I do them in a roaster, and you can throw them in your Vitamix or your blender or whatever. But if you just want a really super simple, let's make some super fresh tasting tomato sauce, like on the spot, throw your tomatoes in a bag in the freezer when it's the middle of January and you want some really yummy warm pasta on a cold day. Put your tomatoes in a pot, cook them down, get your immersion blender out, boom, you have fresh tomato sauce. So that's another way. You know, traditionally tomato sauce is canned in a jar and put on the shelf. And that's great. And I think that's an awesome one to keep on your shelf because it's so versatile for pizza sauce or you know, spaghetti. You can turn it into barbecue sauce or ketchup or any of those kinds of things. But you don't have to go to all of that trouble if that's not something you're into, you don't have time for it, you don't have the right equipment. Okay, on to the next thing. So you can dry tons of things you can dry. So I have herbs. If you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, I have herbs and foraged things hanging all over our house. We live in a 1-bedroom, open style loft house that I love, by the way. I hate doors. We have like no doors and it's fantastic. I'm sure some people are like, that's weird, why don't you have doors? But I think that it creates better family because everybody is immersed in what's going on and no one's like isolated through the room. Again, that's a whole nother video. But I have things hanging from the ceiling like jewelweed, which you can use to make into salves or soaps, and it's great for itchies, for poison or mosquito bites, dry skin, things like that. You could hang basil, oregano, mint, any of those kinds of things. I'm trying to think what else I have. Marigold leaves hanging from the ceiling. So many things that you can dry. Like if you start really digging into things that you can forage, if you don't grow a garden, you can forage, you can hang and dry. I mean, even like these chives right here, I could theoretically, if I didn't have a freeze dryer or a dehydrator, I could just get a nice little bunch, tie it up, and hang it from the ceiling. And boom, I would have dry chives in January when my chives aren't producing. So, super easy way. And, you know, like I said, we have herbs hanging. They're pretty, so it makes great decoration. I don't really decorate. I decorate with herbs and random things that I've foraged from the woods. And I think it's awesome. I love it. I think it's beautiful. You could also sun dry things like tomatoes. You know, sun-dried tomatoes. So you could just take like a cookie sheet and put it outside on your deck or whatever. Now, I'd probably put like maybe a piece of cheesecloth over it, or if you have some kind of just lightweight, transparent something, not plastic or anything like that, but you know, something just to keep the bugs off of it. Or if you have you know, somewhere that's maybe covered, that at least it would keep the bugs and the dust off. So easy ways to dry. And we literally just have like a butcher twine roll in the kitchen. I don't consider that special equipment. Maybe you do. And I just cut a piece off, hang them up, and move along. Something else you can do is infuse. So up until like a couple months ago, I never really thought about infusion as a preservation method. I was listening to several podcasts and I was like, oh yeah, duh, of course. Like I'm preserving the herb or the flower or the whatever in the oil. So you're probably thinking, well, I don't make soap, or I don't this, or I don't that, or whatever. Why would I need to infuse things? But you could take, if you like olive oil on your salad, for instance, you like to make a dressing out of olive oil. So you could put your basil, now you want to dry it first, then infuse it. So like hang the basil, hang the dill, hang the mint, whatever it is, hang that up, put it in the oil. Of course, there'd be a motorcycle driving past, like as we're trying to have this nice conversation. Dry the herb, put it in the oil, and then you can sit it in a windowsill or whatever. You can even sit it in your pantry, really. You could solar infuse it in the window if you wanted to, or you could just sit in the pantry and that would be fine too. Make sure they're dry before you infuse them, or you can get like mold and things like that. But this is a great way to make like really flavorful, delicious dressings for your salad. You know, you go to the store and you want to buy like basil infused olive oil and they charge you a premium for it. Why? Just get the olive oil, dry the basil, put it in yourself. So that's an amazing way to preserve herbs for food or for medicinal purposes. So, you know, like I have dried lavender infusing in oil right now, and I'm going to use it in soap because lavender soap has a million benefits. So that's such a rabbit hole that you could go down, and it is an amazing way to preserve herbs or, you know, foraged things or whatever. Okay, next thing is eggs. If you know me, you know I'm very passionate about preserving eggs. So 4 ways that you can preserve eggs that literally require no equipment and really no skill. Salt cured egg yolks. I know that sounds really challenging. I would say the most special equipment that you need would be an old t-shirt and some string. You wouldn't even need string. If you have bread ties in your drawer, you know, like I have them too. My grandmother, my mom, same thing. We all have a drawer full of bread ties. We have less bread ties now because we like make our own bread for the most part, but nonetheless, string, bread ties, whatever. It's a super simple process. If you follow Jessica at 3 Rivers Homestead in weeks 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 of her Every Bit Counts challenge for 2022, she talks about this process. We had tried it, gosh, probably a year or more ago, and we kind of failed. And when I saw Jessica do it, I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, I really have the skill to do this. It's really not that skillful. It's not that hard. I don't know why we messed it up the first time. I think we let it sit in the fridge too long and it got like rock hard. But it's so easy. You just take like a deep kind of Pyrex dish, like maybe one that you'd make like a cobbler in or something. Put a layer of salt down, good salt, like Redmond's real salt, pink salt, something like that. Sit your yolks in, not your whites, sit your yolks in there. And then you just cover it with salt, sit it in your fridge for 10 days, pull them out, put them in an old t-shirt, a piece of cheesecloth, whatever you have that's breathable, tie them up like candies, put them in your fridge. I posted this on my Facebook and Instagram, like probably a week or so ago, so you can scroll back and kind of see that. I kind of talk about the process a little more, or go watch Jessica's video. She is amazing at describing how to do things like this, so you can check that out. And then your whites, you can add them into breakfast the next day. You could freeze them and use them in baking later in the winter or whatever. But it's an amazing way. So I forgot to tell you, what do you do with salt cured egg yolks? You use them like Parm cheese. So you take a microplane, a grater, whatever it is that you have, and you just grate it like on salad, on pasta or whatever. And it's an amazing way to have a cheese substitute. We're not anti-cheese, but if you can't do cheese, or you're just looking for something different, / you want to preserve eggs, that's a great way to do it. And they keep like up to 4 weeks or so. You might be able to get a little bit more time out of it. So it's not necessarily a long-term preservation method, but it's a preservation method nonetheless. Water glassing eggs. I have a whole video on water glassing eggs, so you can go check that out on our channel. And I know that sounds really complicated, but again, the most specialized thing that you need for that is hydrated lime. We picked it up at our local masonry store. You might be able to find it at your hardware store, maybe Tractor Supply or Rural King or whatever you have, things like that. So that's a great way to preserve eggs, and you can keep fresh eggs for like 1 to 2 years that way. Pickling eggs, easy. You literally need a pot, an Instant Pot. I do my eggs in an Instant Pot. If you want to know how to hard boil your eggs in an Instant Pot, check out Bud's channel, our 12-year-old. His channel is Bud's Outfitters, and he has a video step-by-step on there about how to do your eggs in the Instant Pot. But you can definitely do them in a pot. However your preferred method of hard boiling eggs is, you can do it that way. And then you pickle them. And so we just save pickle juice from previous batches of pickles. You could use store-bought, like if you buy store-bought pickles, save that juice. Don't dump it down the drain. Save that juice and then pickle your eggs in it. If you do red beets, and you buy some red beets at the store, or maybe from like a local farm stand or whatever, save that juice, use that to do red beet eggs. And you can do all kinds of pickled eggs, buffalo pickled eggs and dill pickle and bread and butter and garlic and dill. And there's a million ways to pickle eggs. And again, we've had pickled eggs in the fridge for months and months and months, and they are delicious. So great preservation method. Last one, I personally do not do, but you could freeze your eggs. Like you could crack them open, drop them in a muffin tin, freeze them that way. You'd scramble them probably when you pull them out, or use them in baking. I don't do that method. We've tried it. It's not my favorite, but it would be an option if you don't, have a freeze dryer, or you don't want a water glass or things like that. Okay, so drying in the oven is also an option. So if you don't want to don't really have a way to hang things, you can dry like slices of cucumber. You could season them and make like cucumber chips or zucchini chips or whatever. You could dry strawberries, make banana chips or whatever. You could do this in your oven on like the lowest setting it'll go, usually 175 or 200. It depends on your oven. Just put them on a cookie sheet, and you could do parchment paper if you want. And just dry them. You can season them. Like if you're doing bananas, you could put some cinnamon on it or nutmeg or whatever, and preserve it that way. And dried food, dried or dehydrated food, I would say typically lasts a year, maybe more than a year. It just depends how well you store it. And you can just put those in a mason jar and then stick them in your pantry. Done. No special equipment at all. Mason jar, oven. Let's see. Salt cured pork. Again, not one that we've dove down the hole. I'm hoping to. We're getting a pig from a farmer here in the next month or two. And I'm hoping to kind of communicate with the butcher about how I want things back so that we can salt cure the pork. There's been a lot of podcasts lately about how to salt cure pork, and so I really want to dive down that rabbit hole hard. But that's one that you could look into. There's lots of great videos about it. Like if you check out the Meat Smith, I think Justin Rhodes has one on it. If you have Abundance Plus, obviously there's a ton of resources on there about it. Just Google a video. You'll find a video on how to salt cure pork. Okay, so salts. Talking of salt, if you, again, are growing herbs, if you dry your nasturtium, your dill, your basil, your parsley, you can make salt out of any of those things. So hang the basil up when it's dry, crush it up. So I have a mortar and pestle. You don't have to have one of those. You can certainly, literally, you could crush it in your hand like this. You could just put it in like a bowl and just kind of use a spoon. You just want to get it as fine as you can. You could put it in a food processor if that's something that you have. And then just mix it up with salt. So like if you do like half a jar of dried nasturtium leaves, then you do half of the jar in salt. Shake it up and you have flavorful salt. So that's an amazing way to preserve your herbs, and you're getting really good quality seasoning for your food to use all winter long. Making vanilla. Vanilla is so easy to make. I mean, it is so silly to buy, especially buy imitation vanilla, but it's silly to buy vanilla at the store or whatever when it is the easiest thing to make. So you literally just need vanilla beans and vodka or rum. I personally buy like the cheapest vodka that they have at the liquor store, because why not? So I get a huge bottle for like $10. And you just put your vanilla beans in, pour your vodka or your rum over top, let it sit in a dark, cool place for 3 to 6 months, and boom, you have vanilla. You can crack the, kind of slice the vanilla bean open and get a little bit more potent flavor. I tend to reuse my vanilla over and over. So, I let it sit in the jar until it's done. And then I move it on to the next one. This too, like we use amber bottles. We found some amber bottles at a yard sale for nothing, and we use those for our vanilla, and it's perfect. Thrift store too would probably be a good place to look for that kind of thing. Or you can use a mason jar. Use a mason jar, put some aluminum foil around it, or just sit it on a dark shelf, and you'll have delicious vanilla. And you can flavor it too. So like if you want to get like cherry vodka. Now I would look at the ingredients. You might not be able to get like the cheap at that point because it might have like weird flavoring junk in it. But you can go down the flavored route too if that's something you want to do. You can infuse your honey with your herbs. So you can grow, again, basil, lavender, whatever it is that you like to grow, and infuse your honey with it. So if you have more like a savory thing like basil or parsley, you could have basil infused honey, and you could use that when you're marinating pork chops or chicken, or I mean, what would basil flavored honey not be good on? It would be good on anything. You could use it in a dressing, thin it out and use it as a dressing on greens or whatever, on vegetables. You could go a sweeter route and you could put in like a lavender, and you could make a lavender honey, and that would be amazing, like on vanilla ice cream, or even stirred into your yogurt. Anything like that would be delicious. So again, with that one, you want to make sure that you dry the herbs fully and then infuse them in the honey. Don't put your raw, undried herbs into your honey. Same concept as with the oils. Fire cider and elderberry syrup. So these are two things that you can make yourself, or you can buy them from local people. But if you're looking to preserve your peppers, onions, garlic, horseradish, all those things that are in fire cider is also called fire tonic, or here like they call it super tonic, and it's just this really potent, like if you're stuffed up, you have a cold, you take a shot of it, and whew, man, it'll clear you right up. So again, check out YouTube or find a blog about how to make fire cider. Those are basically the ingredients, and you can preserve your vegetables that way. Elderberry syrup, if you grow elderberries, or you know someone that does, or you have access to them, it's a great way to preserve your elderberries, make syrup, have that ready all winter. Again, find a YouTube video on that one. It's not super hard. It's something that you could definitely do yourself. It'd be a great activity if you homeschool. Fire cider or elderberry syrup, any of these things would be amazing homeschool. Culinary science, all that kind of thing. Fermentation. So fermentation can be really scary. I personally have had about 1 million fails with fermentation, whether it's vegetables or sourdough or whatever. Lisa at Farmhouse on Boone, I feel like does an amazing job at teaching fermentation. Also Carolyn at Homesteading Family, she does a lot of fermentation. So you can start with something really simple. So I had posted the other day that we did preserved our lemons in salt water. And it's technically a preservation method of fermenting. but it doesn't like get smelly or, anything that you typically think of with fermentation. So, you just do and look up the ratios, but you just do like salt and water. You drop your lemons in, you do the ferment lid. And I had lemons on the shelf for 6 months and they were still delicious and fresh and not squishy or moldy or anything like that. So that's a great way to preserve something like lemons. You could also ferment things coming in out of the garden: okra, cucumbers, zucchini, onions, obviously sauerkraut, things like that. So you can preserve things like that through fermentation. And the only thing you need to ferment, I said ferment lid, but you don't have to have a ferment lid. You can literally use like a cheesecloth, just something that can breathe. You could do vinegars, so you could make like peach vinegar and mango vinegar and all those things. And, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down with fermentation, kombucha, things like that. These are all preservation methods that really don't require special equipment. Now, kombucha, you do kind of want to have the bottles with the special lids. And so that could get a little bit, down the road of having special tools. But sourdough doesn't require anything special. Fermenting vegetables doesn't require anything special. Preserving lemons, that doesn't, you don't need anything special for that. So you could definitely go down the fermentation road and get some good preservation skills under your belt that don't require really much money or skill or anything. Okay, my last one is fridge pickles. I love fridge pickles of all kinds. So we fridge pickle radishes, onions, peppers, cucumbers, zucchini, different squashes, and fridge pickles are so easy. You could make your own brine, vinegar, pickling spices. You could add sugar to it, anything like that. Again, a lot of times will just recycle. We go through a lot of pickles, so we'll just recycle that brine, and I'll just literally take my mason jar, pour my brine in it, chop up a bunch of cucumbers or onions or whatever, throw them in, I set it in the fridge. And I've had pickles in the fridge for over a year and they're crispy. I almost prefer fridge pickles over canned pickles. I love pulling a cold pickle out of the fridge and so delicious. So those are my ways to preserve food, start going down the food preservation rabbit hole without any skill, without any equipment, with really not that much money short of whatever you need to invest in the actual thing, like the cucumber, the bacon, whatever, but you don't really need any special equipment for these things. So if you have questions about any of these methods, if you have things to add to it, let me know in the comments. And yeah, we'll see you guys next video.